Namaste, and let's go live for another bicycle live stream on Saturday, March the 8th at 6:41 a.m. 23 degrees, and I've ridden about 25 kilometres so far this morning, and still warm for autumn, quite warm actually, with the days warming up to 30 degrees the last few days, and still quite humid for autumn as well. But I'm sure a cool change will be happening soon. It's been a beautiful bike ride this morning. The weather's held off, the rain has held off, and we're in for a fairly clear weekend. So I'm going to do a live stream this morning. It's a follow-on from a live stream I did. Stacey and David, thank you for watching, and thank you for watching, my love. That wasn't to you, David, that was to someone else. I'm going to do a live stream that's a follow-on from one I did 2 weeks ago, which was called Understanding Love. If you haven't seen that one, you can watch it on my YouTube channel. And this is the natural follow-on to it called Understanding Fear. So I'll just set a little bit of a foundation of... and good morning, Kat, and good morning, David. Yeah, it was it was a reference to my love that is watching, not to yourself. So it's just that I said good morning, David, and then I said yeah. And anyway, you understood, I'm sure. Okay, so let me just cross the road here first and concentrate. Okay, so let's get onto topic here. Right, understanding fear. There is only, David says a lot of people have fear, that's for sure, hence why I'm doing the topic and why it's a natural follow-on from love. There is actually only one force in the universe, and it is love. It's what the universe is made of. It's what we're made of. It's what energy is made of. However, we have a thing called free will, which enables us to decide whether or not we want to attract that energy into our life or not. And so we term the opposite of love, we call it fear, and it's what you might refer to as the lack of love. But the interesting thing is there is no such a thing. There is no such a thing as lack of love, because love permeates everywhere. And all the what we understand as fear is something that's occurring in our mind as a reaction. You may have heard the saying, false evidence appearing real, or as Will Smith says in the movie After Earth, danger is very real, but fear is an illusion. And it's an illusion that we create in our mind as a reaction to, or a response to events that are occurring in our mind. So the question comes in understanding fear, why we would do that. Our natural deepest desire is love. And this is what we're always wanting, what we're always trying to achieve is love. From the earliest point to our last dying breath, we always want a feeling of love. So why, if the feeling of love is the dominant number one thing that we want in our life, why would we ever give in to fear? Why would we ever believe the lies in our head that are so convincing that we live, some people live almost their entire lives in a state of fear. In fact, a lot of people do. So why do we get into that state? Well, it's important to understand the difference between the heart and the head, and how the natural desire that we have for love is coming from the heart, and how the overriding nature of fear is coming from our head. And why then, the question is asked, is it coming from our head? Well, to be quite blunt, fear originates from a lack of faith, and that lack of faith originates, you can call it faithlessness, it originates from a lack of understanding. But at its core, it's a lack of faith. It's a lack of belief that the universe has our back. For if we believe, not just believe, but if we know, if our experience is that the universe is always providing us experiences for our highest good, if we believe that and accept that, then we do not live in fear. We live in a state of love. We are connected with the heart. But when we have experiences that put us in a place of disbelieving that the universe is there for us, we fall into the trap of becoming faithless, of not believing in universal power, universal force, universal love. And this then pretty much puts us on our own. Disconnect. We make a decision, a conscious decision, a free will decision to disconnect with the wisdom of our heart, and we are then out on our own, lost, with just our crazy mind to keep us company. And our mind really has very little idea of what is going on. And without it being guided by the heart, it is hopelessly lost and always misdirecting us, and always creating situations which are usually wrong and which usually result in us ending up in a state of fear because we've no longer accepted the connection to universal truth, which would be telling us what is going on. So the next question comes up: why would we disconnect from the ultimate source of truth? Well, this is it's a good question and an interesting one, because all of us suffer from a problem of wanting to be independent, wanting to be the independent enjoyer, and we pay a price for that. The price we pay for that is we want to do it on our own. We want to be number one, and we don't want anyone telling us what to do. That's called the false ego, and the price we pay for that is that we don't get to hear our heart when we are in that state. The false ego doesn't allow us to. It pushes the heart's wisdom away, and unless we end up in a very tricky state where we need some guidance, urgent guidance, then we don't hear our heart. So there is also another factor at play here. It's self-preservation. When we don't understand what's going on in life because we're not connected to our heart, if we experience something that we would describe as being hurtful, then as a form of self-protection, our heart is so incredibly sensitive that it does not want to feel any pain, any hurt, and as a form, it only wants to feel love. As a form of self-protection, we develop a mechanism to prevent ourselves experiencing any hurt, rejection, any emotional pain that we may have experienced before. We will store it as a heart and mind memory, and we will we'll make a subconscious note that a certain thing can be painful and we won't go there again. And Sandra says, interesting, thank you. Yes, I'm glad you find it interesting, Sandra. So all we have to do is observe the people we know in our lives and look at how they live their lives. Some people have a lot of faith, and because of that faith, they connect into the love in their heart, and they experience a degree of peace, contentment, and you'll actually see it on their face. You'll see that they are relaxed. You'll see that they have a wisdom. You'll hear it when they talk. You'll see that they're not blaming others for their experiences. They're understanding that it's lessons for their highest good. Somebody else will be in a state of fear as a form of self-protection to prevent themselves from feeling hurt or emotional pain again. And because they've chosen to do that, the sad end result is that it disconnects them from their heart's wisdom. I understand why we do it. I've done it myself many times and continue to do it. So I'm not foreign to it at all. In fact, I'm a great master of being in a state of fear myself. So hence why I understand the concept and the lessons. So, and I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for people that are in the same sort of situation, that are using fear as a form of self-protection. And there is sometimes a point where it's justifiable. For instance, if you put your hand on a stove that's hot, your natural mechanism is to pull the hand away so it doesn't get burnt. So that sort of connects in with an automatic reflex or response to protect ourselves. So it's not really fear, but it is, you would say, oh, I'm afraid of being burnt. I don't want to get burnt again, right? In a physical sense. So you make a note, you go, stove is hot, do not touch it. Do not want to get burnt again. So sort of similar thing in an emotional sense, where we're like, I don't want to get hurt again. I'll make a mental note and I will put myself into like a protective mode. But we can't live our lives in this way, because we build up walls that create a distance between us and the other people in our lives. And when we try to connect deeply with them, we find that we actually can't, because we feel too afraid. So what is the solution then? If that is the situation for so many people in the world, and it is, and not only is it the situation with so many people in the world, but I see it a lot in young people now. I've noticed a lot. Somebody said something the other day which I had noticed, and it was a really good description. They basically said young people just cannot connect anymore, or they're afraid to connect. And I thought, yes, I've noticed this. The society we have now is so distant from each other. You know, we're using these electronic devices, but we're not actually connecting with people. And there's a lack of training or knowledge in how to do it, and there's a fear around doing it, because the fear relates back to we don't want to feel any degree of hurt because of the incredibly sensitive nature of our heart. So what can we do, knowing that this fear is actually something? It's very, very important. The first step to gaining control of a situation is understanding what the situation is, understanding what the problem is, understanding how it came about, and then working on it from there. So it's awareness, which brings a degree of power, and then from there we can find the tools to actually work on it. So when we understand that this fear is something in our mind, and our mind only, it's something that we created, only we created, not somebody else. Somebody else did not give us fear. When we understand this, when we start to gain control over it, we start to have power over what had power over us previously. Because when we understand it, it loses its power. It no longer has a hold, because we realize it's an illusion. It's an illusion in our mind. It's something that is not real, though it is extremely believable. And it's something that we can decide, we can trace it back, and we can go, okay, I understand how it came here. I understand there was a point in time in my life when this was a necessary thing for me to do in order to be able to handle the situation. However, I can also understand that it's no longer serving me, and it's causing, you could say, it's causing like a restriction or a lack of ability for me to function in a holistic way. So I choose now to work on releasing this fear. So we release fear by choosing to work on what we want rather than focusing on what we don't want. And we release it by using the time-proven methods of meditation and yoga and deep breathing and exercise and nature and spiritual connection. What we need to do at the core is redevelop faith. Faith that the universe is always giving us exactly what we need at the exact moment. Everything is perfectly controlled, and we ourselves are perfectly imperfect. When we look, and how do we know that that is true? Look back over your life and see how things had to be the way they were. That in the long run, you were put in the place you needed to be for the lessons that you needed to have, and that follows your journey, your spiritual development. So the more you see that, the clearer that becomes, then morning, and then the more the clearer that becomes. Good morning, Lizette. How are you? Then the more you start to have faith, the more you start to believe. And even if you're going to say, oh yeah, but that's all right for you, what about somebody that's in a really shitty situation or whatever? It's like, Helen says, trust Harry and know that everything is always working out for us. Thank you, Helen. Trust, faith, that's what it's about. I've been in shitty situations. Sometimes people say, oh, you're such a privileged, white male. It's like, yeah, it's not always been like that. And I, even in the last, fractured my ankle in September last year, 6 years earlier, I broke my knee and my wrist. If you think that's things always going the way I'd want, then, and there's plenty of other examples. But so each time something like that's happened for me, I've looked at it and I've gone, you know what, I can't argue with this now. I cannot argue with the fact that I've got a broken knee, I've got a broken wrist, I can't walk, I have no strength in my right arm. I can't argue with it. There's no arguing with the universe. When it wants to do it, when it wants to do something for you, it does it. And so, and the same thing happened last September when I broke my ankle. I was coming home on my motorbike and I could not avoid hitting the kangaroo that ran out in front of me in the dark. And then it was over, and the next thing I know, my ankle was in great pain. These are things that are meant to happen. There's a lesson connected with it, and you may not understand the lesson at the time, and you may never understand the lesson, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lesson there, and it also doesn't mean that it wasn't for your highest good. So fear at its core is a lack of faith, and to combat fear, we work on developing our faith. So I ask you to understand and to see and to know that the universe actually has your back and is always doing things for you for the highest good, even when you cannot believe 1% that could be the case. It's still the case. So thank you for watching. Susie Cat says, the universe is a tad too harsh at times though. Why do lessons have to be so painful and fearful? That's a really good question. They have to be to get our attention, because the way our false ego works is that it is inherently, amongst other things, not only is the false ego inherently arrogant, but it's also many other things such as lazy, and thinks it knows it all. And there is a method in the madness, so to speak. There is a reason for the pain and the harshness of some lessons. It has to be that way in order to bring us to our knees sometimes. Otherwise, we just don't get it. We just don't listen. And that's part of our inherent false ego arrogance, is that we just don't listen. So, and Helen says, I may not understand my journey, but I will trust as I relax and allow that is for the highest good. Take care, Harry. Thank you, Helen. So thank you everyone for watching. Hope you have a great day. Thank you to my love who was watching as well. Thank you, my love. And remember, wait for this car to go past. Remember to live vegan and save lives. And I will speak to you soon. Ahimsa.